and a quick overview of the assessment criteria, how you're going to be assessed. We're going to look at each part of the test, some of the challenges associated with those parts, and what are some solutions that we can come up with. We're going to then look at a couple of quick vocabulary aspects, round off with some tips for speaking, and then I'll show you some resources that you can use as well. All right, guys. So in terms of this IELTS speaking test format, how is the speaking test in the IELTS unique? What makes it different from any other test? Answers in the chat box, guys, please, if you know. What makes it unique? Marala says it's face-to-face. Excellent. Good. Excellent. That's what everybody said. It is a face-to-face, one-on-one interview, regardless of whether you're doing paper-based or the computer delivered. In other English language proficiency tests, you don't get to speak to someone. You're being recorded. So it's like talking to a computer. And some people find that very strange and awkward because it's not natural. But in the IELTS exam, you will be speaking to a living, breathing human being. Guys, what about time? How long is the test? How many parts? Any ideas in the chat box? Mizuki says 11 to 14 minutes. Good. Mirali says 3 parts. Excellent. So it's got 3 parts and it lasts for about 11 to 14 minutes. Again, this is much shorter than other exams. In other exams, the speaking can last for up to 40 minutes. So it's much shorter than other exams. And like I said, it's face-to-face. And there are 3 parts. What's gonna happen in part 1? In the chat box, guys, what are you gonna be asked in part 1? What happens in part 1? Levgen says it's an introduction. Farouk says the introduction. Good. And what type of topics are you going to be asked? Good. You're going to be asked basic questions about familiar topics, and this will last about 4 to 5 minutes. What about part 2? What happens in part 2? Lakshmi says you're given a task card, right? Abdul Qadir says the long turn, cue card, right? So it's known as the long turn. You'll be given 1 minute to prepare. Followed by a 1 to 2 minute talk on a topic chosen by the examiner. And the whole thing part 2 lasts for about 3 to 4 minutes. And what about part 3? Abdul Qadir says it's a discussion. Good. Any other ideas? Azam Khan is discussion. Good. But discussion about what? Right. Kauru says a discussion about part 2, exactly. So it's going to be an abstract, it's going to be a discussion, abstract or general questions related to the same topic in part 2. Right, so this is the format of the test. Like I said, we're going to look at some of the challenges associated with each part and what are some solutions we can come up with. But before we do that, I think it's incredibly important to understand how you're being assessed in the exam. It's not just a random assessment. Your examiner is not going to say, sit down, I'm going to listen to you talk, and I'll give you a band. There are fixed assessment criteria. And if you know what those criteria are, like Kathy says, there's 4 criteria, right? If you know what those criteria are, it can help you to figure out what you need to do in order to improve your scores. So guys, any ideas what the criteria are? In the chat box, please. Ariel says coherence, fluency, good. Maiva says pronunciation. Good. The first assessment criteria is fluency and coherence. What does this mean, though? What do we mean by fluency and coherence? Clarity. All right, Sabrine. Any other ideas? Zainab says talking fluently. Fatima says flow. Exactly. It's basically the flow, the rate at which you speak. Does it sound natural or not? And coherence basically means where your ideas connected and related. The next assessment criteria is lexical resource. What does this mean? What does lexical resource mean? Right. It's just a fancy way, Kathy, right, Stacy, to say vocabulary. The third assessment criteria is grammatical range and accuracy, whether you're able to use a range of grammatical structures, simple, complex, and accuracy refers to the fact of whether they were technically correct or not. And the last one is pronunciation, things like word stress, sentence stress, all of those things. And you'll be assessed on a scale of 1 to 9 in each of these criteria. And then what do you think your overall score is going to be then? If you get a score from 1 to 9 in each of these criteria, what is your overall score then? Right, Marala, it's basically the average of all four, which means what? Doing well in one assessment criteria, let's say you're able to show a range of vocabulary, could lift up your vocabulary score, your overall score, but also vice versa. Not doing well in one assessment criteria might hold your score down. Right, guys, now I know this is not a regular class, but do you mind if I give you some homework? Can I give you some homework? Good, I think everyone, good, awesome. I think everybody agrees. So guys, what I would like you to do is I want you to go to this link, the Take IELTS website, or you can just type it into Google, Take IELTS Speaking Band Descriptors. And what you see once you go to this link, and Layla has just put the link into the chat box as well. Thank you, Layla. You'll see this. Don't worry if you can't see anything, you can't read it clearly right now, but this is what you'll see. And you'll see a table with 5 columns. The first column says band, and after that we have the 4 assessment criteria that we just discussed: fluency, vocabulary, grammatical range, and pronunciation. And what this table is called the speaking band descriptors. And what it shows is at each band, what you need to demonstrate in terms of each assessment criteria. So if you want a band 7, what you need to demonstrate in terms of fluency, lexical resource, grammar, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. And why this is important is this is basically what your examiner is going to be using to assess you. Obviously, the one that they have is in more detail, but the essence is in this table. The basic things that they're going to be looking for are listed in this table. So it's an excellent way to get an insight into what examiners are looking for, and you can use it as a tool for self-analysis. So for example, what's the difference between band 5 in terms of vocabulary and band 7? What are the things that you need to do in order to push up your score? So please do that for homework. And what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to look at each part of the test in detail. So let's start with speaking part 1. Remember, we said it's an introduction, sort of the introduction. What type of topics could you be asked questions about? In the chat box, guys, please. Could you give me a list of topics you might be asked about? What are some of the topics? Hobbies, Elena saying, the weather, familiar topics, right? Hometown, work, family, music, sports. Good, excellent. Let me give you an example of a question that you might be asked. What's your favorite food? So guys, in the chat box, how would you answer this question? What's your favorite food? Guys, in the chat box, how would you answer this question? What's your favorite food? 2 people just said pizza. Alma says Mexican food, pasta, pancakes. Good, a whole range of food. Awesome. Now let me show you 2 answers to this question. So this is the first answer.
Pasta.
And let me ask the question again. What's your favorite food? This is the second answer.
My favorite food is pasta.
Right. Now those are 2 answers to this question. Technically they were correct because they answered the question. But each answer had an issue, there's a problem with each of these answers. What's the problem with the first answer? Pasta. Mirala saying it's too short. That's what Abdul Qadir is saying as well. Exactly. The first answer is too short and precise. What's the problem with the second answer? My favorite food is pasta. It seems longer than the first one, but what's the problem? Right, Federica, it's repetition. Layla just repeated the question and just added pasta at the end. So there was no independent language being produced. Now, neither one of those answers were wrong. It's what we do in real life. In real life, maybe we don't use full sentences. We get straight to the point. But you're not being assessed in real life. Now, in the IELTS exam, what you want to do is you want to do whatever you can to maximize your score. So we need to figure out a way that you could sort of maximize your score. So if we've identified those 2 problems, what do you think the solution is? In the chat box, guys, what is the solution if these are the 2 problems? Pak is saying elaborate our ideas. Ariel is saying paraphrasing, be creative, expand. Exactly. I think the solution, very simple solution, is to expand your answer. I'm sorry, guys. I'm very proud of that animation. It took me like about 2 hours to figure out how to do that. But yeah, expand your answer. But we need to figure out a way to do it organically or naturally. So what we're going to look at today is a very simple but extremely effective sort of technique, and that's to think about the 5 W's and 1 H. Now, what do you think this stands for? The 5 W's and 1 H in the chat box, guys. What does this stand for? Well, let's say is who, where, right? When. Excellent. The 5 W's are basically the 5 WH questions or question words, right? And what about the H? How, exactly. So what, where, when, who, and why. And the H is how. If you keep this simple framework in your head, it will allow you to expand literally almost any answer that you give. So let's see how this works. In one of my classes, I asked somebody what her favorite free time activity was. And she said, I like dancing. Now in real life, that's fine. But in terms of an IELTS exam, maybe not the best answer she could have given. So we're going to try to use this framework to expand that answer. So what can we say for the what instead of I like dancing? In the chat box, guys, instead of just saying I like dancing, what can we say for, how could we answer what? Kathy saying salsa. So remember, how could we answer, expand I like dancing? Exactly, Reem, a dance form. So Rudin is saying Bhangra, which is an Indian type of dance, salsa, Japanese traditional dancing, exactly, Kaoru, exactly. So I've put salsa and ballet, for example. How could we answer this question, where? Where do you guys dance? In the chat box, guys, please. Ladan dances in the streets, good. Umida at home, in my room. Mirali says a dance club, good. I've got at home and in a dance studio. Who do you dance with? Who do you dance with, guys? In the chat box? Friends, good. Abdul Qadir says family. Somebody just said they're dancing with their chair, I guess. If you wanted to. Alone, my dance teacher, good. So I put friends and other dance students. When do you dance? At least in your imaginary partner, Umida saying in the morning, spare time, good. I put weekends and twice a week. Why do you dance? Give me a reason for dancing. In the chat box, guys, give me a reason for dancing. Routine to feel alive. Somebody said to exercise. Book says to keep your body fit, to express yourself. Amazing, right? I put fitness and passion, right? According to Hindu scriptures, Lord Shiva, one of the Hindu gods, dances to destroy the universe. So there's many reasons to dance. What about how? Now, this doesn't mean you get up and show the examiner how you dance. You could say whether you're a good dancer or a bad dancer. Or you could, for example, ask how long have you been dancing? So for example, I put 2 years or 5 years. So which answer is better? The first one we started with, I like dancing, or this one? What do you guys think? Obviously, this one, because I think what a lot of people fail, they don't get is they think I like dancing. What more can I say? They feel like they don't have a lot to talk about. What we've discovered that there's so much information buried underneath that you just sort of need to dig out and incorporate into your answer. So that's the sort of main problem or main mistake people make when their answers are too short. But there's another mistake that they make as well when they shift to the complete other extreme and the answers are too long. And they keep on speaking until the examiner has to say, wait, let me ask you another question. So what we want to do is we want to figure out the correct balance. And I would say the correct balance is about 2 to 3 sentences. That way it's not too short, not too long. But what does this mean in terms of the 5 W's and 1 H, do you think? How does that relate to the 5 W's and 1 H? What do we do then? If we want 2 to 3 sentences. Do I need to use all of them? Exactly what you guys are saying in the chat box, right, Fatima? Just pick any 2 or 3 of them that you feel work the best and incorporate them into your answer. So, for example, I might answer this question by saying I love playing basketball because it's an excellent way to keep fit. There's a court next to my house, and I try to play 2 or 3 times a week. Simple, not too short, not too long. So, like I said, very simple. Simple problem, simple solution. I think what happens with part 1 is sometimes people underestimate it. They take it very lightly because they think it's just familiar topics. But don't forget, it is still part of the exam. So you need to practice using this technique. Right, guys. So let's before we go to speaking part 2, can I have the next poll question up, please? And I'm going to ask you guys part 1 question. So how many languages do you speak? Out of these 3 options, I want you to choose which one do you think is the best answer. If you can't see the poll question, my team, one member of the team is going to read out each option. So how many languages do you speak?
3.
That's the first option. The second option is?
I speak 3 languages, English, Urdu, and Spanish.
And the third option is?
English is my first language, but I use Urdu at home with my parents. I also studied Spanish at university, but I'm not very fluent.
So guys, out of those 3, could you pick, which one do you think was the best answer? So put it in the chat box, please, or answer the poll question if you can see it. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds. The chat box, a lot of you are saying the third one. All right, can I see the results, please? Excellent. Almost 82% of you have picked the third option. All of them are technically correct because they answered the question, but personally, I think the third one is the best because like I said, it's about 2 sentences and it gives detailed information, and there's the production of independent language. All right, guys, let's move on to speaking part 2. You guys mentioned at the beginning that's known as the long turn. And you're given 1 minute preparation time. Now, this might not seem like a long time, but it's actually 12 times as much preparation time as you're given normally if you were to speak on the spot. Sometimes when you're asked to speak on the spot, the maximum you'll be given is 5 seconds to prepare. Sometimes you're given 0 seconds, no time to prepare. But in the IELTS exam, like I said, you're given 1 full minute. You'll also have the opportunity to take notes. You'll be provided with paper and a pencil. Remember, your notes are not assessed, so you don't have to worry about things like handwriting or whatever. You'll be given the full question, including all of the subpoints. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Instead of being given just 1 word, you're given the entire question. And also very helpfully, you're not going to be asked any general knowledge topics. They're not going to say, for example, thermonuclear dynamics, speak for 2 minutes. Dinosaur behavior, speak for 2 minutes. It's always going to be a talk about your personal experience or feelings. Now, this is an example of a question you might be given. Describe a person you know who you think is successful. You should say who that person is, how often you see each other, what that person does, and why you think they're successful. So you'll be given this entire card in the exam, right? And then you'll be given, like I said, paper and pencil. Now, what is the biggest challenge people face with speaking part 2? Guys in the chat box, what do you think the biggest challenge is? Twinkle's saying time. Abdulkadir saying lack of confidence. The Bill Levgan saying speaking for 2 minutes. And a whole bunch of you, I think, are saying ideas. Exactly. I think the biggest challenge is running out of things to talk about. 2 minutes doesn't actually sound like a lot of time. And when you're sitting at home, maybe watching something, 2 minutes goes like in the snap of a finger, in a snap. But when you're speaking, 2 minutes is can actually be a very long time. So we need to figure out a solution. What is one simple solution to this problem? And personally, I think the easiest way to improve your score in speaking part 2 is actually the preparation time that comes before it. That is the secret to improving your score in speaking part 2. It's to improve your note-taking ability, because your notes are a direct reflection of your thought process. And the more organized and clear your notes are, the more organized and clear your talk is going to be as well. If your notes are not complete and unorganized, I can guarantee you your talk is also going to be incomplete and unorganized, because it is a direct reflection of how you've organized ideas in your head. Also, you can avoid having to think of ideas and speak at the same time. If you take incomplete notes, you're going to have to think about what you want to say while you are speaking. So you'll have to do 2 completely different things at the same time, and it can become very difficult when you have to speak for 2 minutes. So the more you have written down, the less you have to think while you are speaking. And the notes operate like a safety net, because just in case you forget, you can just look down and check your note. So we're going to see how we can do this by looking at some note-taking strategies. I think the first thing to keep in mind is do not write full sentences. Why do you think you should avoid writing full sentences, guys? In the chat box, please. Why do you think you should avoid writing full sentences? Michelle's saying it's a waste of time. And Twinkle's saying, exactly, it'll take too long. By the time you've probably finished your second sentence, your minute's already going to be up. Also, let's assume you're an incredibly fast writer and you're able to write everything. What will happen then is you will end up, I guarantee you'll end up reading. And it's not a reading test, it's a speaking test. So just the key information. Make sure you cover all of the points, because like I said, if your notes are not complete, chances are your talk is not going to be complete. Related to that, follow the same sequence as the topic, because the talk that you give will be in the same sequence as your notes, because that's how you've organized ideas in your head. And although it's not mandatory to follow the same sequence in the test, if you don't do that, you increase the chances of either missing one of the points or repeating yourself. And both of those are things that can affect your score. Probably the most important strategy, write at least 2 pieces of information for each point. And I'll show you what that means in a second. And if you have time, include a key vocabulary section. Words that are specifically related to the topic that you want to make sure that you use. So guys, let's see how this works. So let's look at the question one more time. Describe a person you know who you think is successful. And we've got the subpoints, who that person is, how often you see each other, what that person does, and why you think they are successful. Now, while I was working on this, my mom walked into the room and she said, you better talk about me. So I'm gonna talk about my mom. I love you, Mom. So let me show you the first set of notes. So mom, twice a year, businesswoman, started her own business. What do you guys think of these notes? You think that's enough to speak for 2 minutes? Kathy's saying they're too short. No, they're definitely too short. If I use these notes, it probably lasts, like somebody said, about 20 seconds, right? So let's use that technique that we mentioned. Try to use at least 2 pieces of information for each point. So the first point is who this person is, and I'm going to talk about my mom. What's the second piece of information I could use? In the chat box, guys, what do you think the second piece of information is? Zainab saying whether she's married or not, right? Her name, age, something as simple as that, exactly. So my mom, her name is Mukti, and she's 59 years old. Something as simple as that. But it'll expand what you are going to say, and it gives more detail and information to the person who is listening. Instead of twice a year, I can say something like, growing up, I saw her every day. Now I see her 2 or 3 times a year because we live in different countries. Instead of businesswoman, how could I expand on that point? What else could I write instead of just saying businesswoman? In the chat box, guys. This is what she does. Mariam saying her workplace. Good. Anything else? Right? Chiamaka said, what type of business? Exactly. So I could say something like she designs and sells silver jewelry. She imports them from India and sells them around the Gulf. She's been doing it for about 25 years. The name of her company is Miss International. And why she's successful, I could say things like she had a long-term vision. She didn't have any connections in the business. She worked for long hours. And I've also included a key vocabulary section, words that I want to make sure that I use: independent, dedicated, creative, hardworking. I might want to say, I might have wanted to say that she's a tree hugger. What does that mean, tree hugger? In the chat box, guys, what does it mean to be a tree hugger? Mariam says, love the outdoors, loves nature. Good, somebody who loves the environment and plants, exactly. So because I want to make sure I use that word, I can write it down in the vocab section. So guys, which set of notes do you think is better, A or B? In the chat box? Right, I think almost all of you are saying it's unanimous. It's B. If I had this set of notes in front of me, I would be able to give a much more detailed and comprehensive talk. And now remember, it's my mom. Of course, I know her name. Of course, I know what her business. But if I don't write it down, I don't increase the chances of actually using that information. Because for me, the word businesswoman in my head means all of these things, but it doesn't for the other person. So remember, I'm not talking for myself. I'm talking so the other person can listen. So by giving this information, I also give the other person more detail. And it's the same reason the vocabulary section is important as well. Now, don't worry if you feel like you're not going to be able to do this in 1 minute. I can promise you 1 minute is more than enough time. All you have to do is practice taking notes. When people practice for part 2, they only practice speaking. They only practice speaking. They don't practice taking notes. And once you do that, you'll see 1 minute is more than enough time. Mary's asking, is it okay to look at the points from time to time? Yes, you can. It's absolutely no problem to glance down at your notes. There's many different ways of taking notes. Some people use mind map. Some people use quadrant, flow chart. Lots of different ways. I used bullet points in the previous slide. So guys, which one do you think is the best? In the chat box, which one do you think is the best? What's the best way to take notes? Eunice is saying bullet points, Abdul Qadir is saying mind map. And the answer to that question is there is no answer. It depends completely on your personal preference. Some people might like using bullet points. Some people might like their information sort of more visually spread out, so they use a mind map. What I would say is practice with all of them and see which one works best for you. Which one allows you to sort of come up with the most information. I guess, and the other sort of technique that we're going to go over right now is visualization. And what do I mean by that? By visualization, I mean, can you help the listener visualize or imagine what you are talking about? What are the details or examples that you can give to make the listener imagine what you are or visualize what you're talking about? And you can use this even when you get a topic that you don't know a lot about. Because remember, in the IELTS exam, you cannot change your topic. You have to speak about whatever the examiner gives you. So you need to be ready to make something up. So let's look at an example. This is an example of a question you might be given. Describe a magazine that you like reading. You should say what type of magazine it is, how often you buy it, what type of articles it has, and why you like reading it so much. Now, let's pretend I don't actually read it. I don't read a lot, let's say. I don't read many magazines, but I still have to answer this question. So what you can do is take something you are interested in and use that information to sort of imagine a magazine. So let's say I love football. And I want to talk about a football magazine. It doesn't have to be a real one. So guys, can you help me come up with a name for football magazine? In the chat box, please. Give me a name for football magazine. Mariam saying Football Today. Sport for Life, Goal, Soccerland, Kickoff, excellent. Liverpool Echo, exactly. Where's this magazine printed? In the chat box, guys, where's this magazine printed? In the UK, locally, in Italy, whatever, right? Now, I can use the same thing to talk about how often you buy it. Now, let's look at what type of articles it has. So guys, in the chat box, what type of articles does this magazine have? Even if you don't read football magazines, you could come up with this information. You can make up this information. So sports related articles about matches, somebody's written down transfer rumors, footballers' lifestyles. Exactly, excellent. Maybe interviews. Give me a football player. Let's say in last month's edition, I read an interview with. Okay, somebody said Messi, right? Now, in that interview with Messi, I learned that how long, let's say as a kid, he used to practice for how many hours? In the chat box, guys, how many hours did he practice for as a kid? Michelle's saying 8 hours, 7 hours, good. I learned that his favorite movie was, or his favorite movie is, guys, give me the name of a movie. What's Messi's favorite movie? Die Hard. Okay, Titanic, exactly. I also learned that he has a pet. Guys, what pet does Messi have in the chat box? Somebody's written the Avengers. A dog, a rabbit, whatever. So you can use that information. Like I said, we've made all of these things up, but you could use it and incorporate it into your talk. So visualization is another technique that you can use. Let's look at so guys, before we look at speaking part 3, now remember we said it was a discussion linked to the same topic as in part 2. So let's say in speaking part 2, you were asked, describe your favorite movie. Now, can I have the next poll question up, please? Poll question 4. So remember in part 2, my topic was describe your favorite movie. Now, which of these could be a part 3 question? So if you can see the poll question, guys, just put your answer there, or I'm gonna get my team to help me read out the question. So the first question is,
how many times have you watched the movie?
the second question.
What impact do movies have on society?
What about the third one?
What was your favorite part of the movie?
And the fourth question.
Who did you watch the movie with?
Right. So guys, if you can't see the poll question, please put your answer in the chat box, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds. So remember, which of these is the speaking part 3 question? Yes, Layden, the first person was Aiden. All right, can I see the results, please? Excellent. 78% of you have picked the correct answer, right? What impact do movies have on society? Because those other 3 questions were not abstract or general questions. What they were follow-up questions to part 2, and you're not going to be asked follow-up questions. That information you most probably would have already included in your talk. What you are going to be asked are abstract or general questions, like that question. What impact do films have on society? Guys, could you come up with in the chat box, can you come up with some other questions you might be asked? What are some abstract questions related to cinema? In the chat box? Rudin saying, would you love to make movies someday? But Rudin, that's still more of a personal question. Mariam saying, how have movies affected social media? Exactly. How does cinema shape society? Excellent. Why do young people like watching different movies to older people? Something like that. Excellent. Now, guys, what is one challenge people face with speaking part 3? And think about the part 2. We just finished part 2. What is the difference between part 2 and part 3? Arushi just said it exactly. You don't have preparation time. Like Ruben said, you don't have the opportunity to take notes. It's a discussion. You sort of have to answer the question as soon as it's asked. So what we want to do is we want to figure out a solution, and a way to buy ourselves a little bit of extra time. It's obviously not going to be 1 minute, maybe just a couple of seconds, but a little bit of time to help us process what we want to say. And how we can do that is we can use what is known as a delaying phrase. So guys, in the chat box, can you think of something you could say to buy yourself a little bit of extra time? Somebody said that's a great question. That's a good question. Let me think. Good. So You could say something like, that's an interesting question. By saying that, you're buying yourself a couple of seconds to think. But I do think you need to have more prepared, because for the first question, you can't answer with that's an interesting question. Then the second question, that's a really interesting question. Then the third question, that's a really, really interesting question. So you need to have a few more ready. So you guys have put some down in the chat box. I've got a few more as well. I've never really thought about that before. So she's asking, could you please repeat the question? Another one is, there's no simple answer to that question. There are many ways to answer that question. In one of my classes, somebody came up with a delaying phrase. That's a really interesting question. What do you think? But you can't ask the examiner what they think. You need to answer the question. So using a delaying phrase is a very simple way to buy yourself a little bit of extra time. The other challenge that I think a lot of people face with speaking part 3 is short, underdeveloped answers. Now, remember in speaking part 1, what did we say our target was? What's the ideal answer, speaking part 1? How many sentences? Arishi, right, 2 to 3 sentences. Your answers in part 3 have to be even longer. So we're talking about 5 to 7 sentences at least. So what is the solution? What is one way we can sort of achieve that target? Any ideas, guys? How could we achieve that target? Speaking in greater depth, right? But how do we do that? I think you can speak in greater depth by exactly like Ariel and Eunice are saying. Use examples to support your ideas. And I'm going to show you what this looks like in a second. What I would like you guys to do now is think about, how does the use of examples help? Why is it useful to use examples? In the chat box, guys, please. You can, Arish is saying you can expand your answers. Good. Illustrate your answers. More information. Good. Excellent. But I think one of the most basic things that it does is it makes your ideas clearer if you give an example, because you know what you're talking about, but the other person might not. So it helps to make your ideas clearer. It makes your ideas more relatable. It makes them more persuasive or convincing if you give examples. It can help you to structure your answer, and I'll show you what this looks like in a second. And very importantly, it makes your ideas more interesting and engaging. I think this is something that a lot of people underestimate. Were you able to, or are you able to engage the examiner? Is what you're saying interesting? And again, expand your answer. This animation took a little less time because I figured out how to do it, but yeah, expand your answer. And let's see what this looks like. This is an example of a part 3 question. What are the advantages of living in a big city? Now, let's say my first idea is education. How can I expand on this, guys? Could you guys help me with some examples? What examples could you give for education? In the chat box? Saying convenience. Suleiman saying schools. Good. Anything else? You're more likely to find good schools, free university. Excellent. So I've put, you can attend specialized institutions like the London School of Economics, or you can learn different languages. So for example, English at the British Council. My next idea is career opportunities. So guys, can you help me out with some examples again? Career opportunities. In the chat box? Ahmed is saying more career opportunities. Arish is saying MNCs or multinational companies, bigger firms, right? I've put, for instance, you can work in the public sector, in a government job. You can also work in multinational companies like Google or Apple or so on. What about my third idea is technology and infrastructure. What are some examples for this idea? In the chat box, guys? Somebody's written transportation, computers, IT. Excellent. I've put in New Delhi, we have the metro system and access to high-speed internet. So by using examples, I was able to expand on my ideas. And this would allow me to achieve my target of sort of producing 5 to 7 sentences. And if you notice, you can also think of these sort of like paragraphs. By giving examples, I can avoid mixing my ideas together and ending up in a muddle. So by using examples, I can separate my ideas and present them logically. So that's another sort of technique that you can use. So I would advise you to practice using that. Right, guys, we're gonna finish off by looking at a couple of vocabulary aspects. And the first one is we're gonna look at collocations. What is a collocation? Any ideas in the chat box? What is a collocation? Kathy's saying words that go together. Arsh saying fixed phrases, a pattern. Good. I'm sure almost all of you use collocations. It's just that you don't know that they're called collocations. So let's look at an example. McDonald's is the world's biggest blank chain. So how could you fill that blank in? Are you saying fast food rather than saying fast food? Good. Right, the answer is fast food. Now, have you ever heard anyone say or read anywhere that McDonald's is the biggest quick food chain in the world? Have you ever heard anyone say that or read it anywhere? I hope not. Would you tell your friends, hey, I'm really in the mood for some rapid food? Would you say that to your friends? No. And grammatically, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them, with these two sort of words. Fast means quick, quick means rapid. But they sound very strange and awkward. Why? Because fast food is an example of a collocation. Two words that go together so often, it's like they've become one single unit. And if you hear anything else, it sounds strange or wrong. So let's get some practice. Can I get poll question 5 up, please? And we're gonna look at 2 more collocations. So number 1, if you want to stay fit, you should avoid eating. The first option is trash food. The second option is junk food. And the third option is garbage food. And in the second question, when I get up in the morning, I like to take a fast shower, swift shower, or quick shower. So guys, the answers in the chat box or in the poll, please. All right, can I see the results, please? Awesome, so 95% of you have got the first one correct. Good, it is junk food. There's no such thing as trash food or garbage food. And 91% of you got the second one correct, right? It's a quick shower. There's no such thing as a fast shower or a swift shower. Awesome, and let's look at one last vocabulary aspect, and that's the use of descriptive adjectives. Now, sometimes I think what happens is when we speak, we have a tendency to sort of repeat words. And by doing that, we're not using the opportunity to show a range of vocabulary. So let me give you an example. So a very common word that people use and use repeatedly is big. So they might say, for example, that's a big problem. What is something that we can use instead? What are some words that we can use instead? Aishwarya's written huge. Good. Any other ideas? Large, colossal. Excellent. So I've got huge, enormous, gigantic. So instead of saying, for example, it's a big problem, you can say it's a huge problem. It's an enormous problem. What about bad? Bad is a very simple word. What else could we use instead? In the chat box, guys? Instead of bad. So instead of saying, for example, it was a bad experience. It was Zainab saying an awful experience, right? Farad is saying horrible experience. Good. Good. I've got terrible, horrible experience, and a dreadful experience. Beautiful is a word that people overuse. So, for example, instead of saying that was a beautiful view, what could we say instead? Instead of beautiful, gorgeous, fantastic, good, lovely, amazing, spectacular. Awesome. You guys are great at this. I've got spectacular, amazing, breathtaking and mind-blowing, or stunning. So just now, these are not necessarily overly complex words, but by using them instead of using very simple words, you'll be able to show your range of vocabulary and avoid repeating yourself too often. So I'd advise you guys to get some practice for descriptive adjectives, but do make sure you do practice, because in one of my classes somebody once said breath blowing and mind taking. So just make sure you practice using descriptive adjectives. Awesome, guys. So let's round off with some tips. Remember your homework. Familiarize yourself with the public band descriptors. Become aware of what examiners are actually looking for. Record yourself speaking when you practice. This is another excellent tool for self-analysis. You can, even if you practice with someone, record yourself speak and then go back and listen to yourself. While we're speaking in our heads, we all sound perfect. But when you go back and listen to yourself, you'll be able to see where you're repeating certain words, where you're repeating certain phrases. Did you give examples? All of those things. Remember what we said, answer using 2 to 3 sentences in part 1, using the 5 Ws and 1 H. Practice note-taking for part 2. I guarantee you will see an improvement in your actual law. Expand your answers using examples in part 3. And practice using descriptive adjectives. And also don't forget to speak naturally. Pretend that you're talking to a friend. Speak the way that you would normally speak. All right, guys, I'm going to jump to the question and answer box now. And I'm also going to leave the webinar program up. Remember, these are all new topics. These are webinars that are going to sort of premiere for the first time. And the links to these webinars should be up on takeielts.org. So guys, let me jump to the Q&A box. And also guys, could you please in the chat box also leave any comments about what you thought was useful, anything you enjoyed about this webinar? Because they help us sort of figure out what we need to concentrate on. So guys, let's look at the question and answer Q&A box. Dipanita says, is there only one question asked in part 3? And how long do I have to speak in part 3? No, Dipanita, it's going to be a discussion. So it could be anywhere between, let's say, maybe 5 to 6 questions. And how long do you have to speak? Like I said, don't think in terms of time for speaking part 3. Think in terms of sentences. I would say 5 to 7 sentences and you will have sort of a complete answer. Rebecca saying, where can I take the mock test? Rebecca, I'm going to show you resources in a second, but you can use the takeielts.org website. It has a sort of huge bank of tests that you can Nicholas is asking, is the recording of this webinar going to be published on the web page? Nicholas, the link to the recording will be emailed to you directly to the email address that you registered with. Farzo is asking, please let me know about the importance of accent and pronunciation in the speaking test. So Farzo, accent is something that you are not going to be assessed on. There's no such thing as an incorrect accent. An accent is basically just a reflection of where you were raised. So like I said, there's no such thing as an incorrect accent. However, what they are checking is your pronunciation. You can pronounce a word incorrectly. So that's why the assessment criteria is just simply called pronunciation. It's not called accent and pronunciation. So don't worry about your accent. Speak the way that you normally speak. Mehrad is saying thanks, and remember, you'll never walk alone. Yes, thank you. Swati saying, how many sentences? Sorry, where did the question go? How many sentences, I think, for speaking part 2. So Swati, Swati, for speaking part 2, again, there you're going to have to speak for 2 minutes. So that depends on how many sentences you can produce in 2 minutes. You just need to make sure that you cover all of the points. Pak is asking, is it going to be a problem if I'm a bit verbose? Not at all. By being verbose, you're actually showing, like I said, you'll most likely be able to show your range of, for example, grammatical structures and vocabulary. Rosalind is asking, can I use fictional answers? Of course you can. You remember, like I said, you're not going to, for example, in part 2, you're not going to have a choice when it comes to the topic. So you need to be ready to make something up. Remember the football magazine we talked about? It wasn't a real one. You can make it up. You can completely make it up. Somebody's name is in the Russian script, so I'm sorry I can't read it. I think Cyrillic script. What about pronunciation criterion? Again, I would say check the assessment criteria, the band descriptors. They have detailed information in terms of what they mean by pronunciation and how you're going to be assessed. Let's see what else is there. Twinkle's asking, where can I find the schedule for July webinars? Twinkle, I think they're up on your screen right now, and you can also check the takeielts.org website to register. Mariam is asking, is eye contact important? Mariam, eye contact and body language, those are two things that are not necessarily assessment criteria, but I think it is a reflection of how you speak and how you feel. So for example, in real life, when you speak to somebody, you'd make eye contact with them. If you don't make eye contact with your examiner, chances are you're feeling nervous, and that's going to reflect in the way that you talk. So even though it's not an assessment criteria, I do think eye contact is something you should be making with your examiner. Zainab's asking the same thing. Can we invent things like a movie that doesn't exist? Yes, absolutely, no problem. You can make up anything that you want. And that's one reason I think people struggle with part 2 is because they think they have to come up with things that are real. You don't have to. For example, if you don't like reading books and you're asked to talk about a book, you might have to make one up. That's absolutely not a problem. Guys, I'm gonna look at maybe one more question. Ali's saying, is part 3 topic connected to part 2's? Yes. It's going to be a more abstract discussion of the same topic. So remember the example that we looked at. Part 2, you might be asked to describe your favorite movie. And you would respond sort of using your own personal point of view. While part 3 will be a discussion, but from a more general perspective, not about you personally, maybe from the perspective of society or more abstract perspective. And somebody's asking about gestures. Guys, gestures, that same thing, body language. I think you mean things like, should you use your hands while you speak? It's absolutely your preference. I use my hands when I speak a lot. You can't see me right now, but my hands are flailing everywhere. So it's absolutely not a problem. Use whatever you do naturally. Awesome, guys. So let's, I'm sorry if I didn't get the chance to answer all of your questions. If I didn't, what you can do is you can join our Take IELTS official Facebook page and you can post your question on there. And we have a team of IELTS experts who will be more than happy to answer your questions. And there's a lot of other information you can find on that page as well. You can also check the takeielts.org website. In terms of preparation, that website is going to be your best friend. It's got support material, free practice tests, and a lot of other really useful information. So guys, before I go over the rest of them again, like if you didn't get a chance, in the chat box, could you just please let us know what you liked about this webinar, anything that you found useful. It's really helpful for us when it comes to designing webinars. Guys, the takeielts.org website also has a free computer-delivered familiarization test. So if you want to see what that feels like, if you plan on taking the computer delivered or you have to take the computer delivered, you can get a taste of what that feels like. The Road to IELTS website is also extremely helpful. They've got downloadable practice tests, lots of interactive activities and strategies and tips for different question types. The British Council has also collaborated with FutureLearn to come up with an IELTS online preparation course. It's about a 3-week long course. and you can do it at your own pace. Very comprehensive sort of preparation course. We have a suite of apps that you can download and use on your phones. The IELTS Prep app has instant access to free practice tests, grammar tips, exercises, quizzes, and we've recently redeveloped our Word Power and Word Ready apps. So an excellent way to, for example, practice some of the things that we looked at, descriptive adjectives and things like that. And there's a range of books and study guides available. Anything with the Cambridge stamp on you can use, but I would personally recommend the Cambridge official test series. They're collections of authentic past papers, real tests that were used in the past, and the best way to practice. Guys, the Avengers have put some of the links that you're going to need in the chat box, and you can check them again once you get this. All right, guys, thank you. Also, yes, sorry, if you are in this position where you have to take the IELTS indicator, you'll find all of the information at the IELTS indicator website. Thank you guys so much. You guys are amazing. Please continue washing your hands, stay safe. Don't forget to do your homework. And I hope we'll see you guys soon in our webinars in July. Thank you guys so much. Take care.